Hello guys, I am Taiba and you are on my channel Audiovisual Books. The sole purpose to create this channel and to record the books is to connect you with the bookish world. Literature provides us the food for our minds as we require for our body. So try to listen the books while doing your routine works. It will nourish your mind. Let's start. We have started The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. Let's see few of its pages today. Tuesday, November 10, 1942. Dearest Kitty, great news. We are planning to take an eighth person into hiding with us. Yes, really. We always thought there was enough room and food for one more person. But we were afraid of placing an even greater burden on Mr. Kugler and Mr. Clayman. But since reports of the dreadful things being done to the Jews are getting worse by the day, father decided to sound out these two gentlemen and they thought it was an excellent plan. It is just as dangerous whether there are seven or eight. They noted rightly. Once this was settled, we sat down and mentally went through our circle of acquaintances, trying to come up with a single person who would blend in well with our extended family. This was not difficult. After father had rejected all the one-down relatives, which was a dentist named Alfred Dussel. He lived with a charming Christian lady who is quite a bit younger than he is. They are probably not married, but that is beside the point. He is known to be quiet and refined, and he seemed from our superficial acquaintances with him to be nice. Mip knows him as well, so she will be able to make the necessary arrangements. If he comes, Mr. Rizal will have to sleep in my room instead of Margaret, who will have to make do with the pudding bed after Rizal arrived. Margaret slept in her parents' bedroom. We will ask him to bring along something to fill cavities with. Years end. Thursday, November 12, 1942. Dearest Kitty, Maeve came to tell us that she had been to see Dr. Dussel. He asked her the moment she entered the room if she knew of a hiding place and was enormously pleased when Mip said she had something in mind. She added that he had nothing to go into hiding as soon as possible, preferably Saturday, but he thought this was highly improbable since he wanted to bring his records up to date, settle his accounts, and attend to a couple of patients. Mip relayed the message to us this morning. We did not think it was wise to wait so long. All these preparations require explanations to various people who are feel ought to be kept in the dark. Mip went to ask if Mr. Russell could not manage to come on Saturday after all, but he said no, and now he is scheduled to arrive on Monday. I think it is odd that he does not jump at our proposal. If they pick him up on the street, it would not help either his records or patients. So why the delays? So why the delay? If you ask me, it is stupid of father to humor him. Otherwise, no news. Yours then. Tuesday, November 17, 1942. Dearest Kitty, Mr. Drizzle has arrived. Everything went smoothly. Mip told him to be at a certain place in front of the post office at 11 a.m. when a man would meet him, and he was at the appointed place of the appointed time, and he was at the appointed place at the appointed time. Mr. Clement went up to him, announced that the man he was expecting to meet was unable to come, and asked him to drop by the office to see me. Mr. Clement took a streetcar back to the office, while Mr. Russell followed on foot. It was 11:20 when Mr. Russell tapped on the office door. Mabe asked him to remove his coat so the yellow star could not be seen, and brought him to the private office where Mr. Clement kept him occupied until the cleaning lady had gone. On the pretext that the private office was needed for something else, Meep took Mr. Russell upstairs, opened the bookcase, and stepped inside. While Mr. Dizzle looked on in amazement, in the meantime, the seven of us had seated ourselves around the dining table to wait the latest edition of Our Family with coffee and cognac. I first led him into the Frank family's room. He immediately recognized our furniture but had no idea we were upstairs, just above his head. When we told him, he was so astonished he nearly fainted. Thank goodness she did not leave him in suspense any longer. She brought him upstairs. Mr. Russell sank into the chair and stared at us in a dumbstruck silence, as though he thought he could read the truth on our faces. Then he shuddered. Ever, ever, but our nicht in Belgium, the office at the auto, they were not coming. Your escape was not working. We explained the whole thing to him about how we had deliberately spread the rumor of the officer and the car to throw the Germans and anyone else who might come looking for us off the track. Mr. Russell was speechless in the face of such ingenuity and could do nothing but gaze around in surprise as he explored the rest of our lovely and ultra practical annex. We all had lunch together, then he took a short nap, joined us for tea, put away the few belongings we had been able to bring here in advance, and began to feel much more at home, especially when we handed him the following typewritten rules and regulations for the Secret Annex Vendon production. Prospectus and Guide to the Secret Annex. A unique facility for the temporary accommodation of Jews and other dispossessed persons. Open all year round, located in the beautiful quiet wooden surroundings in the heart of the Amsterdam. No private residences in the vicinity can be reached by streetcar 13 or 17 and also by car or and bicycle. For those to whom such transportation has been forbidden by the German authorities, it can also be reached on foot. Furnished and unfurnished rooms and apartments are available at all times without meal. Price free diet, low fat, Romania, water in the bathroom, sorry, no bath, and no various inside and outside walls, cozy wood stoves for heating, ample storage space for a variety of goods, two large modern safes, private radio with a direct line to London, New York, Tel Aviv, and many other stations available to all residents after 6 p.m. No listening to forbidden broadcasting with certain exceptions, that is, German stations may only be tuned in to listen to classical music. It is absolutely forbidden to listen to German news bulletins regarding to where they are transmitted from and to pass them on to the others. Rest hours from 10 p.m. to 7:30 a.m., 10:15 a.m. on Sundays. Owing to circumstances, residents are required to observe rest hours during the daytime when instructed to do so by the management. To ensure the safety of all, rest hours must be strictly observed. Free time activities, none allowed outside the house until further notice. Use of language it is necessary to speak softly at all times. Only the language of civilized people may be spoken, thus, no German. Reading and relaxation, no German books may be read except for the classics and works of scholarly nature. Other books are optional. Calisthenic daily. Singing only softly and after 6 p.m. Movies prayer arrangements required. Classes are weekly correspondence courses and shorthand courses in English, French, math, and history offered at any hour of the day or night. Payment in the form of tutoring, for example, a separate department for the care of small household pets with the exception of vermin for which special permits are required. Meal times breakfast at 9 a.m. daily except holidays and Sundays at approximately 11:30 a.m. on Sundays and holidays. Lunch a light meal from 1:15 p.m. to 1:45 p.m. Dinner may or not be a hot meal. Meal time depends on the news broadcasts. Complication with respect to supply corps. Residents must be prepared to help with the office work at all times. Baths. The wash tub is available to all residents after 9 a.m. on Sundays. Residents may bath in the bathroom, kitchen, private office, or front office as they choose. Alcohol for medicinal purposes only. Then, Jorzen. Thursday, November 1942. Dearest Kitty, just as we thought, Mr. Dussel is a very nice man. Of course, he did not mind sharing a room with me. To be honest, I am not exactly delighted at having a stranger use my things, but you have to make sacrifices for a good cause, and I am glad I can make this small one. If we can save even one of our friends, the rest does not matter, said father. And he is absolutely right. The first time Mr. Dozzle was here, he asked me all sorts of questions. For example, what time the cleaning lady come to the office, how we have arranged to use the washroom, and when we are allowed to go to the toilet. You may laugh, but these things are not so easy in the hiding place. During the daytime, we can't make any noise that might be heard downstairs, and when someone else is there, like the cleaning lady, we have to be extra careful. I patiently explained all this to Mr. Dozzle, but I was surprised to see how slow he is to catch on. He asks everything twice and still can't remember what you have told him. Maybe he is just confused by sudden change, and he will get over it. Otherwise, everything is going fine. Mr. Dozzle has told us much about the outside world we have missed for so long. He had sad news. Countless friends and acquaintances have been taken off to a dreadful fate. Night after night, green and grey military vehicles cruise the streets. They knock on every door, asking whether any Jews live there. If so, the whole family is immediately taken away. If not, they proceed to next house. It is impossible to escape their clutches unless you go into hiding. They often go around with list, knocking only on those doors where they know there is a big haul to be made. They frequently offer a bounty, so much per head. It is like the slave hunts to the olden days. I don't mean to make light of this. It is much too tragic for that. It is in the evening when it is dark. I often see long lines of good innocent people accompanied by crying children, walking on, ordered about by a handful of men who bully and beat them until they nearly drop. No one is spared. The sick, the elderly, children, babies, and pregnant women all are marched to their death. We are so fortunate here, away from the turmoil. We could not have to give a moment's thought to all this suffering if it were not for the fact that we are so worried about those we hold dear. We can no longer help. I feel wicked sleeping in a warm bed while somewhere out where my dearest friend are dropping from exhaustion or being knocked to the ground. I get frightened myself when I think of close friends who are now at the mercy of the cruelest monster ever to stalk the earth. And all because they are Jews. Jerusalem. Friday, November 20, 1942. Dearest Kitty, we don't really know how to react. Up to now, very little news about the Jews had reached us here, and we thought it best to stay as cheerful as possible. Every now and then, Mape used to mention that what has happened to a friend, and mother to Mrs. Wandon would start to cry. So she decided it was better not to say anymore, but we bombarded Mr. Duzzle with questions, and the stories he had to tell were so gruesome and dreadful that we can't get them out of our heads. Once we have had times to digest the news, we will probably go back to our usual joking and teasing. It would not do us or those outside any good if we continue to be as gloomy as we are now. And what would be the point of turning the secret annex into a melancholy annex? No matter what I am doing, I can't help thinking about those who are gone. I catch myself laughing and remember that it is our disgrace to be so cheerful. But am I supposed to spend the whole day crying? No, I can't do that. This gloom will pass. Added to his misery, there is another, but a more personal nature, and it pales in comparison to the suffering I have just told you about. Still, I can't help telling you that lately I have begun to feel deserted. I am surrounded by too great a void. I never used to give it much thought since my mind was filled with my with my friends and having a good time. Now I think either about unhappy things or about myself. It has taken a while, but I have finally realized that Father, no matter how kind he may be, can't take the place of my former word. When it comes to my feelings, Mother Margaret ceased to count long ago. But why do I bother you with this foolishness? I am terribly ungrateful, Gitty. I know, but when I have been scolded for the umpteenth time and have all these other woes of things about as well, my head begins to reel. Yours, N. Saturday, November 2G, 1942. Dearest Kitty, we have been using too much electricity and have now exceeded our ration. The result excessively economy and the prospect of having the electricity cut off, no light for 14 days. That is a pleasant thought, is not it? But who knows? Maybe it would not be so long. It is too dark to read after 4 or 4:30. So we while away the time with all kinds of crazy activities, telling riddles, doing calisthenics in the dark, speaking English or French, reviews books. After a while, everything gets boring. Yesterday, I discovered a new pastime, using a good pair of binoculars to peek into the lighted rooms of the neighbors. And during the day, our curtains can't be opened, not even in an inch, but there is no harm when it is so dark. I never knew that neighbors could be so interesting. Ours are, at any rate. I have come across a few at dinner, one family making home movies, and the dentist across the way working on the frightened old lady. Mr. Russell, the man who was said to get along so well with children and absolutely adore them, has turned out to be an old-fashioned disciplinarian, a preacher of unbearably long sermons on manner. Mr. Russell, the man who was said to get along so well with children and to absolutely adore them, has turned out to be an old fashioned disciplinarian preacher of unbearably long sermons on manners. Since I have the singular pleasure of sharing my far too narrow rooms with His Excellency, and since I am generally considered to be the worst behaved of the three young people, it is all I can do to avoid having the same old scoldings and admonitions repeatedly flung at my head and to pretend not to be here. This would not be so bad if Mr. Russell were not such a tattletale and had not singled out Mother to be the recipient of his reports. If my Mr. Russell just read me the riot act, Mother lectures me all over again. This time throwing the whole book at me. And I am really lucky. Mr. Wendy calls me to account 5 minutes later and lays down the laws as well. Really, it is not easy being the badly brought up center of the attention of a family nitpickers. In bed at night, as I ponder my many sins and exaggerated shortcomings, I get so confused by the sheer amount of things I have to consider that I either laugh or cry depending on my mood. Then I fall asleep with the strange feelings of wanting to be different than I am, or being different than I want to be, or perhaps of behaving differently than I am or want to be. Oh dear, now I am confusing you too. Forgive me, but I don't like crossing things out, and I, in these times of scarcity, tossing away a piece of paper in clearly taboo. So I can only advise you not to reread the above passage and to make no attempt to get to the bottom of it, because you will never find your way out again. Yours then. Monday, December 7, 1942. Dearest Kitty, Hanukkah and St. Nicholas Day nearly coincided this year. They were only one day. They were only one day apart. We did not make much of a fuss with the Hanukkah, merely exchanging a few small gifts and lighting the candles. Since candles are in short supply, we lit them for only 10 minutes. But as long as we sing the song, and that does not matter. Mr. Van Don made a menorah out of wood so that and that was taken care of too. St. Nicholas Day on Saturday was much more fun. During dinner, Bep and me were busy whispering over to father that our curiosity was aroused and was suspected they were up to something. Sure enough, at 8 o'clock, we all roped downstairs through the hall in pitch darkness. It gave me the shivers, and I wished I was safely back upstairs to the alcove. We could switch on the light since the room does not have any windows. When that was done, father opened the big cabinet. Oh, how wonderful! We all cried. In the corner, there was a basket decorated with a colorful paper and a mask of black paper. We quickly took the basket upstairs with us. Inside was a little gift for everyone, including an appropriate verse. Since you are farther with the kinds of poems, Famthar with the kinds of poem you play write each other on St. Nicholas Day. I would not copy them down for you. I received a Cupid doll. Father got bouquets and so on. Well, anyway, it was a time. It was a nice time, and since the nice idea, and since the eight of us had never celebrated St. Nicholas Day before, this was a good time to begin. Yours then. P.S. We also had presents for everyone downstairs, a few things left over from the good old days, plus Mape and Bep are always grateful for money today. And we heard that Mr. Wandon's ashtray, Mr. Dizzle's picture frame, and father's bookends were made by none other than Mr. Vescovi. How anyone can be so clever with his hands is a mystery to me. Thursday, December 10, 1942. Dearest Kitty, Mr. Van Don used to be in the meat, sausage, and spice businesses. He was hired off for this knowledge of spices, and yet, to our great delight, it is his sausage talents and that have now come in handy now. We ordered a large amount of meat under the counter, of course, that we were planning to preserve in case there were hard times ahead. Mr. Wandon decided to make bratwurst, sausages, and matwurst. I had fun watching him put the meat through the grinder once, twice, three times. Then he added the remaining ingredients to the ground meat and used a long pipe to force the mixture into the casings. We ate the bratwurst with the sauerkraut for lunch, and but the sausage, which was going to be canned, had to dry first. So we hung them over a pole suspended from the setting. Everyone who came into the room burst into laughter when they saw the dangling sausage. Dangling sausage. It was such a comical sight. The kitchen was a shambles. Mr. Vandon, clad in his wife's apron, looking farther than ever, was working away at the meat. And what with this bloody hands, red face, and spotted apron, he looked like a real butcher. Mr. D was trying to do everything at once, learning Dutch out of a book, stirring the soup, watching the meat, sighing and moaning after her broken rib. That is what happens when old ladies do such stupid exercises to get rid of their fat behinds. Russell had an eye infection and was sitting next to the stove, dabbing his eye with chamomile tea. Pim seated in the one ray of sunshine coming through the window, kept having to move his chair this way and that to stay out of the way. His rheumatism must have been bothering him because he was slightly hunched over and was keeping an eye on Mr. Vandon with an agonized expression on his face. He reminded me of those aged invalids you see in the poorhouse. Peter was romping around the room with Moshi and the cat, while Mother Margaret and I was peeling boiled potatoes. When get right down to it, none of us were doing our work properly because we were all so busy watching Mr. Wandon. Russell has opened his dental practice just for fun. I will describe the session with his very first patient. Mother was ironing, and Mrs. Wandy, the first victim, sat down on the chair in the middle of the room, Dazzle unpacking his case with an air of importance. Asked for some Eau which could be used as a disinfectant, and Vaseline, which would have to do for wax. He looked in Mrs. Wandon's mouth and found two teeth, and that made her wince with pain and utter incoherent cries every time he touched them. After a lengthy examination, lengthy as far as Mr. Wandon was concerned, since he actually took no longer than 2 minutes. Russell began to scrape out a cavity, but Mrs. Wendy had no intention of letting him. She flailed her arms and legs until Russell family let go of this probe, and it remained stuck in Mr. Wandy's tooth. That really undid it. Mr. Wandy's lashed out wildly in all directions, cried as much as you can with an instrument like that in your mouth, tried to remove it, but only managed to push it in even further. And Mr. Duzzle calmly observed the scene, his hands on his hip, while the rest of the audience roared with laughter. Of course, that was very mean of us. If it had been me, I'm sure I would have yelled even louder. After a great deal of skirming, kicking, screaming, and shouting, Mr. and Mrs. Wandy finally managed to yank the things out, and Mr. Dazzle went on with his work as if nothing had happened. He was so quick that Mr. Wandy did not have time to pull any more shenanigans. But then he had more help than he has ever had before. No fewer than two assistants, Mr. Wandy and I performed our job well. The whole scene resembled one of two engravings from the Middle Age entitled A Quack at Work. In the meantime, however, the patient was getting restless since she had to keep an eye on her soup, and her patient was getting restless since she had to keep an eye on her soup and her food. One thing is certain, it will be a while before Mr. Wandy makes another dental appointment. Yours then.